Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Jess Tyson tōku ingoa. I'm Te Manu Tukutuku of Ngā Toki Whakarururanga. Today we have the amazing Donna Kerridge with us. Donna, you are the founder and director of Ora New Zealand, Rongoā Māori practitioner, and you've worked as an advocate over many decades. There's actually so much that you do, and you've served on a number of expert advisory groups. You are today speaking to me as a kaihautū of Ngā Toki Whakarururanga. Thank you so much for being here.
Kia ora.
Please, firstly, before we get into things, could you explain to me your role with Ngā Toki?
In Ngā Toki, the way I see it is I bring in expertise in the rongoā space and what that means for the health and well-being of both our people and the taiao. So whenever there's a aspect of our free trade agreements that we're looking at, I look at it with that lens. We have a number of other really clever people who look at it with another lens, and between us we get a really well-rounded view. We all come from the same thread, we all have similar values, so it's just a case of inserting specific aspects that we may be able to leverage as a result of some free trade negotiations, and how we can tautoko those negotiations in terms of making sure that we are caring for our taiao and the health and well-being of our people. And others will look at different aspects, and we just have such a range of a wealth of amazing people in that group.
I agree.
It's an absolute privilege to sit amongst them.
I agree. I think you're all amazing. So our purpose of our kōrero today is to, I guess, raise awareness or educate our viewers about the impacts that free trade agreements have on rongoā, what rongoā practitioners can do if they want to export, some advice for policymakers around this kaupapa. But firstly, what are the actual impacts that free trade agreements have on rongoā?
So what I've seen to date is that I'm now seeing how Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade officials needing to be present at internal domestic health policy discussions. And that concerns me because, you know, the policy or health policies associated with the care of our people on this land actually, in my view, MFAT have no place in those discussions. We can't keep looking at the needs of our people and measuring it against agreements external to our country, and therefore perhaps compromising what it is our people need in order to honour other agreements that we may or may not have made. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned that particularly with the Therapeutic Products Act, that parts of that negotiation needed to be run by MFAT first. If we're looking out for our people, I don't see that has a place there, unless it is for MFAT to come in and to assist us in ensuring that our free trade agreements support the needs, the health needs of our population. And to date I haven't seen that, so that's why I have that concern. And of course, as my role on Ngā Toki and our inability to see what's going on, you know, we cite commercial sensitivity and things like that, and of course we can see it. We can see those discussions, but we need to sign a confidentiality agreement in order to see those, which then deprives us of our right to speak to them. So, you know, I'm really reluctant to do those things because my very point of being there is to offer my perspective, to speak to those things, both to the people that I serve as well as my colleagues on Ngā Toki and those that go out and speak on behalf of us. So that really concerns me, that shutting down the public conversation about things that might be great in those agreements, but also those things that might compromise our ability as treaty partners to exercise our rights. So in my view, I think that our free trade agreements are there to accelerate the interests and the needs of our producers. And that's a great thing, but not at the expense of other parts of our community. And that's where the concern is. Whether or not we want to produce and exploit our land in order to be able to increase our exports is another discussion that we should be having internally before we start looking at how we promote the continued exploitation of our natural resources, in particular for Māori of our mātauranga, where people can come and access our mātauranga, use that to develop products, then use that those agreements to have a right to exploit our resources in an environment where we don't have the legislative protections that other countries have. For example, New Zealand has no bioprospecting law. So people can come in here and take our taonga and do with it what they will. As Māori, we don't own those resources. We belong to them. And we have a responsibility, not a right, a responsibility to protect them. And our ability to enact that responsibility, I believe, is compromised through free trade agreements and other agreements that we enter into at a political level.
Now, I want to talk about some examples of where this has happened, just to educate our audience of things that they may have seen in the news that they can familiarise themselves with. How have policies in the past negatively impacted rongoā?
So one of the things that I do see is where people can, organisations or corporations can come in and take our plant material. They can hybridise it.
What does that mean?
Mix it with other varieties. So take our taonga, mix them with other varieties, and then own them and the seeds. And from my perspective as a grassroots practitioner, the real concern for me comes in our ability to sustain the resource, the natural resource, and where I see that's compromised is that quite often hybridised varieties are then sold back to us to plant out, Manuka being the example, to plant out in great swathes around the country. And we think that we're doing good, and it is great to re-veg our past pine sites, for example, with plants that belong here. The challenge that I see is these new hybridised versions of Manuka are going to mix with our true version of Manuka, and that once we start meddling with the plants like that in a very short space of time, roll them out at pace across the country, means that I think our original Manuka will end up being consumed by that variety. And and then so for me as a practitioner, I have to learn how to use this new variety or be unsafe in my practice. And so, and what impact, excuse me, what impact does that have when it comes to the insects, all the other aspects of life that goes to make a Manuka a Manuka? Manuka is particularly important to us as a people. One kōrero from our old people is that Manuka is the only tree never to get sick. And so in times past, when land was not well, we would burn Manuka and spread the ash on the land that wasn't well to help bring it back to life. When we start meddling with those very special taonga species that do that, then we're at risk. The environment's at risk, the health and safety of people who have used for thousands of years Manuka in their healing journeys. Our pūrākau fall by the wayside because they may not be relevant anymore. So that the whole notion of giving plant variety rights to a corporation or to individuals goes against the grain for us and our value system. Our job is to care for them, not to own them, not to play around with them in such a way that it meets some short-term goal but puts at risk the ecology of our planet.
That moves on to my next question, which is, why is the protection of rongoā so important? That's a big one.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons.
The protection of rongoā, like many of our arts, is really, really important, because one of the things for us as Māori is our connection to culture, our connection to place. Rongoā is one way that we can do that. We can also do that through whakairo. We can do that through our rāranga. We can do it through our many other arts that we have. It is our connection back to our homes. It's our connection to our old people. It's our connection to our mātauranga.
Why is the protection of rongoā so important?
If we allow rongoā to be reframed according to a new law, which could be a free trade agreement, it could be a health legislation, whatever, that attempts to define what rongoā can and can't do with little or no understanding of its importance, of its context, and its value going forward in terms of maintaining the health and well-being of the people of this place and the ability of the land to sustain the health and well-being of this place, then we put ourselves at real risk. Risk of exploitation to the point where we can no longer sustain ourselves. Our tikanga, our practices are really important to the health and well-being, in particular, of Māori. I think when you look at ACC statistics in terms of the uptake of rongoā Māori, more than 40% of the people who elect to use rongoā Māori are non-Māori. And that's because they want something different than what is available to them in the current system. And I would say that there's a part of them that is wanting to step outside the current system for whatever reason, and I'm not bagging the current system, I'm just saying it's not enough, and it's under pressure. And if we have a taonga that we can share, that is authentic, therefore safe, then of course we want to do that. We're not anti-trade at all. This is about making available safe, authentic healthcare philosophy and practice to help improve the well-being of everybody.
Now, there have been some policies or laws in place in the past that have really affected the use of rongoā. Can we talk about those? Can you describe those to me?
Sure. So some of the things in the past that have impacted and quite obvious to many people is the Tahinga Suppression Act. But the Tahinga Suppression Act really wasn't about stopping using native plant medicines. It was about preventing people from prophesizing. That was the whole point of that law, was to prevent people being able to prophesize, do crazy stuff. But Māori, we could prophesize. And it wasn't thoughtless science, not science-based and all of that. Maramataka, our practice of using maramataka to help us predict what lays ahead of us by watching the patterns in the environment and seeing how they change over time in order that we be able to respond in an appropriate way, prepare in an appropriate way for what's coming ahead. Why would you outlaw that? And yet it prevented people being able to prophesize. The next thing that came along was the Quackeries Prevention Act. And what that really said, in my view, and I'm no lawyer, but what that really said is you can make no health claims about your rongoā. And
what did that look like exactly?
Well, for me, that's been carried forward. We think that those laws are well gone, but they're actually not. They exist in the current Medicines Act, and I have no doubt that there is a plan to carry that forward under the Therapeutic Products Act, where you can only make claims about rongoā that we say you can make, and therefore constrain and control what it is we can say about our healing methods. So all the control, all the credit and discredit lays in the hand of the Crown about a special taonga that they have no knowledge of. Under the current law, and it's yet to be decided under the Therapeutic Act, Therapeutic Products Act, it says that I cannot claim on my website or on my bottles that a rongoā that I create was traditionally used by my tupuna. That's illegal. How can you have a law that outlaws the truth? There's something fundamentally wrong. And as a species, I don't know how it is that we, human beings of any colour, think that we can create a law in LAW that will trump papatuanuku, the LORE. At the end of the day, the law of nature will prevail no matter what we do. Yet, we invest so much time in LAW. And more I see the LAW not protecting the citizens of the countries, but protecting faceless corporations that can disappear overnight. And this is where my concern and my mistrust of things that are happening in our free trade agreements are oblivious to. And without a treaty lens in there to find ways to awhi our negotiators, to help our negotiators in delivering free trade agreements that not only protect and advance our trade, but protect and advance the well-being of the people in the country and the land upon which we live. There's a lens that is missing. And the knowledge of our people was, I don't like the word very much, but the knowledge of our people was very holistic. Nothing exists in isolation, so therefore nothing is going to fix a problem in isolation. Everything is connected, and when we try to control those connections, we generally stuff it up. And so what we need to do is mimic nature and how nature protects and provides for us. We need to support that process and take a less extractive approach. I say to our Māori traders, look, go for it. We always have. I tautoko us trading. It provides opportunities for our people. But can you tell me when enough will be enough? Or is it just an ever-growing bottom line on your balance sheet? Where is the line? Where is the line that delivers balance? Do you know where that is before you start? Or are we just continuing to grow at any price?
How could rongoā be exploited in the future offshore if protections aren't put into place?
One of the urgent things for us, I think, in terms of protecting rongoā going forward is making sure that we have bioprospecting legislation here in New Zealand that prevents others coming into Aotearoa, extracting our resources and our knowledge and taking that overseas, taking out patents and the likes, preventing us from being able to practice our own tikanga, also putting at risk our access to the resources we need in order to practice our tikanga. The current system is at breaking point. Or actually, I would even go as far as to say it's beyond breaking point. And we need something else. We need something more. What we have is the indigenous knowledge of peoples from around the world that can come in and alleviate some of that pressure on the current system so that it can get itself back together and deal to the things that they deal to best while we take care of the rest. I know that's a leap for some people and for some organisations. I also think that we need to be very careful about allowing an industry to drive our health policy. I see many health professionals, Western health professionals, frustrated by a system that is being driven by the health industry, when really all they want to do is help people live better lives.
More holistically, do you think?
Yeah, but well, even using the tools that they know are available to them, but can't access because of best practice protocols that are put in place to protect people, but they constrain the health professionals at the same time. And so, you know, if we trust people to do their job, then we must empower them, not constrain them.
What advice do you have for policymakers?
I think in order for our policymakers to make the best possible policy is to sit down and talk to the subject matter experts that are impacted by the policies that they are looking at putting in place. We are never going to meet the needs of all the people all the time. But what I really see is people don't understand the implications of their policy until it's already policy. If you want to make a bad policy, at least do it from an informed perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So open the door, start talking to people, start understanding perspectives that are different to theirs, because it is through diversity of thought that we thrive. It's not from one thinking. Just like an orchard will not thrive as a monoculture. You need all the elements to have that food forest working optimally. And it's the same in policy development. And if we are making policies that negatively impact the whenua for marginal benefit, then we shouldn't be doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely shouldn't do it, because where do we think we're getting the next batch of whatever from? If we've exploited everything, there is no longevity in their business. It is not good business to destroy the source of your productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And that we think that it's endless. This human species think that Papa Tūnuku will continue to provide. She has her limits. And one of those limits will be to get rid of those pesky individuals that think this planet was put here merely for our own temporary exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
Just like a spoilt kid in a family, the entire world revolves around them. That is how we behave as a species, and that is how we are behaving in terms of free trade.
What advice do you have for rongoā practitioners who want to export overseas?
I'd say go hard. Go for it. There's a lot of merit in sharing our taonga and helping revitalise taonga that belongs in other places. But like every other trader, know when enough is enough.
When is it enough? What are the signs?
I think the signs for knowing when it's enough is when we look at things like we now only have 3% of our wetlands remaining in New Zealand. That 3% is dialysing the whole country, because our wetlands are our kidneys. And that 3% of kidney function that we have left on our land is trying its hardest to dialyse the rest of the rubbish that we put out there. It's unsustainable. We know it's unsustainable. I feel like enough is enough now. And we do enough to care for each other, to care for our communities. And if everybody on the planet did that, we'd be in a much better place.
If rongoā practitioners do want to export overseas, what can they do to make sure that it's done in a safe way?
I say look to the tikanga that was left to us in and around rongoā. We only harvest what the land can bear, what the plant can bear. And we make sure we give as much as we take. And so we make sure that our work is not negatively impacting any other aspect around us. And so we have to learn how to care for the land, how to care for the plants, how to ensure that the mauri of the land stays strong. And that's why I say rongoā is so much more than plant medicines, than products, things that can be consumed. It's so much more than that. And through rongoā, we learn these things. We learn about balance. We learn about balance of the land. But then we apply that to creating balance in our life. And don't get me wrong, I'm probably the least qualified to talk about maintaining balance. But at least we can see what we're creating by trying to sustain that imbalance. And sooner or later, common sense will prevail.
What are your hopes for the future in regards to trade and the effects on rongoā Māori?
I would like to see us trading in the way Māori did all those years ago, where you have something that would help me, I have something that would help you, and we do just enough to do that. We don't exploit the resource. We care for the resource, but we have a bit more than we need, so we can share that with you, and you in turn can share your excess with us. All the time caring for your resources and the sustainability of those resources for the welfare not only of your people, but of your next generations. And so if we had a trade agreement that did that, trade agreements that did that, and that we were concerned about the sustainability of the resources on both sides of the fence, I think that that would be a perfect solution.
Thank you so much, Donna, for sharing your mātauranga to us.